Hello, everybody. This is our first version of a live debate, and it's sponsored by Intersecting Us. Perhaps you've not even heard of Intersecting Us. Intersecting Us is just a opportunity that I've created several years back. And basically, what I'm trying to do with Intersecting Us is to bring the human element to our equation. And I know whether you're an actuary or mathematician, we do a lot of problems and we work with the numbers, but sometimes what gets left behind in that equation is the human element. And so Intersecting Us is a way that we math people can get some encouragement on the human part of our lives. And so with that, we decided to do a little debate, and I'll call it debate with maybe quotes around it, because a lot of it is just organically determined by hanging out with two of my friends, Brian Rihner and Charlie Johnson. And as we've just kind of hung out together, they have kind of like organically started talking about whether we have free will or not. And it's been really a lively, fun conversation, just in jest and fun. And eventually we decided, well, this is something that we can share with others. And so that's really how simple this live debate came about. And they're super excited about doing it. And what I'm excited about hosting it is that they really are genuinely interested in learning more about the other person's perspective. And so this is really just kind of trying to uncover that perspective. So with that, we definitely want to encourage you to send comments. We will have time at the end. This is scheduled for 1 hour. So you can leave your comments. And if there's comments there, we will answer those at the end. And if there's an opportunity to answer them right away, we'll do that. But in general, we'll wait for the comments to be addressed at the end. So with that, I want to be quiet and pass it over to, I'm going to let Charlie take over. And Charlie, I've met him a couple of years ago. He is the founder, CEO of Actuarial Development Institute. And I can relate a little bit to Charlie's story because his story is similar to mine. He was working as an actuary for about 10 years, and then he got the wild hair to go out on his own. And so he and I have that same wild hair, and he's approaching it with a lot more maturity than I did. But it's exciting to see an entrepreneur, and the way he connects with other actuaries is really cool. And then also, the second guy on the team is Brian, and Brian was the actual guy who I started that wild hair with back in 1995 when we started our company, Salt Solutions, which is now Coaching Actuaries. So that's a brief introduction to them, and I'm going to let them kind of share a little bit about themselves, and then we'll jump right into the debate. So Charlie, can you share about yourself?
Well, I think you did an excellent job introducing me, Dave. So I'll just leave it at that. And my name's Charlie Johnson. I want to say two things. So first, what's my perspective coming in? And then the second thing I'd like to talk about is, what I hope that me and Brian and everyone watching this gets out of, my perspective. So my perspective that I'm coming in with is, I would describe it as hard determinism. I believe that everything that has ever happened or will ever happen, from the next word coming out of my mouth to the stars exploding in galaxies, hundreds of millions of miles away, that all of those things are connected and caused by something the instant before it, ad infinitum, from the origin of the universe until the very end. And that determinism propagates in humans' thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. I think on a deeply philosophical level, you might be able to describe that as one thing, but I think from like a practical perspective of discussion, that those three components of our humanity, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behavior, are the most relevant when talking about, free will and determinism. What I hope first personally to get out of it is to be exposed to new ideas and new perspectives, and to gain a better and deeper understanding of humanity and how and why we behave, and thinking about the world we live in. And what I hope others get out of it is not, I'm not evangelical in that I think you should believe what I believe, but I hope that, through some of the things we talk about, people realize the value of my perspective, of thinking about the world from a deterministic perspective, and how we think about ourselves, about how we relate to, fellow humans, and how we answer really important questions about how we structure society, our justice systems, our governments, how we self-organize. Because I think that viewing the world from from a perspective where there's no such thing as free will is a very useful perspective to view a lot of life's problems that we face. I'll turn it over to Brian.
Okay. Well, yeah, the introduction is fine. I used to be an actuary and now do more philosophy and theology. So that's kind of, we'll sum it up with that. And thanks, Charlie, for that. I like the way you put that. And I wondered when we started this if you would be soft or hard on the determinism. So that's good. I like the way you put that. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the causes behind it as we get going. But so free will, I kind of came up with my own definition because I didn't like any of the others, which is okay. But the way I would put free will over and against like hard determinism is like personal control of the power to make choices that are neither determined by natural causality nor predestined by fate or divine will. I mean, that's kind of the way I put that. So obviously it's over and against determinism, but it comes down to the personal power that we have as a self. And so that's where most free will arguments are going to come from. So when it really comes down to it, many factors influence our decisions or choices or will. But I'm making the case that influence doesn't equal determined. As actuaries, we know that there's different levels of contingencies that can change the way the future goes. So it really comes down to the act of the will, which we'll have to define that too now, I know, but we'll get into that later. But I think that's kind of the main thing. There's an I, a me, a you that's in control of the decision-making capacity or power or ability. So I will argue for a personal causal agent over it against like a hard determinism. So, yeah. And so what we decided before this was to maybe come up with a scenario, and we may change the scenario as we go, or if you're making comments, you can maybe come up with one. But we just had something very kind of benign, but a decision is going to be made. And so I'm going to kind of put that out there. And then Charlie, you can kind of go, well, how would you think this would work? And then we'll start talking about, see where this ends up going. And I do think one comment before about what I want. I think, the first question you might ask is, why does this matter? Well, I think it matters that we make choices. It's something that we all do, and maybe even more so, it matters that other people make choices, whether it's in politics, religion, life, relationships. Other people's choices affect us, and maybe knowing a little bit more about why they're making them, it could help our connection and relationships. And that's and the other one is this should get down into who we are. We all realize, we're human, but what does that mean? And obviously these questions have been around for millennia. So we'll keep going on this. So our scenario, the scenario is pretty benign. There, a guy named Bob knows a lady named Mary and just happens to go in a coffee shop to get cappuccino and sees Mary over there drinking her latte and wonders maybe if it'd be good to ask her out, because she thinks she's kind of attractive. And so, Charlie, I'm going to turn it over to you. There's not much more there. You can put more in the scenario if you want, but how would he make a decision whether I'm going to do this or not, or something in between?
Yeah, that's I like scenarios. I think it's a great way to start because it gives us names and things we can point to. So I'm going to take a step back and answer how I would think, maybe more broadly, how behavior happens, how I personally think about behavior in humans. So I think it comes down to two primary factors that are interconnected. So one of those is our biology. And that is, on one hand, the billions of years of evolution that have happened from single-celled organisms up to us, and what those pressures were and how they molded us into our humanity, the things that make us human. And then even more so, who are we the direct biological descendants of? Who are our parents? What were the genes they carried? What were the epigenetic markers that were passed to us? So that's half of the equation. And then the other half is, what are the interactions we've had? What is the society we were born into? What are the experiences that we've had leading up to that moment? And the interaction between those two things continue to determine what happens next, and also determine how you change, because we change in every moment of every day. And so whether he asks her out, or, maybe even more specifically, what does he say to her when he talks to her, is going to be a factor of all of the conversations and experiences and values that have been imbued upon him, mixed with, who he is, how is he built, what are his values, what are his biological drives and needs. And those will culminate in some behavior. So that's how I would think he's going to behave next.
Well, and so when it really gets, the rubber hits the road, I think we get down to the fact that, so I would agree, there's all these things that come in. I think the way the biology and environment, or however you want to put it, those are the two things that happen. And so really, it seems like, if I understand you right, you're positing those two, and I'm adding a third, really. I'm adding a third, personal will. Obviously philosophers or psychologists have called this different things, but that I am making the choice. And I think maybe it helped me. I know maybe people watching, if you could maybe define a little bit, what would you say? Because you're to still say, I assume, that he's making the choice. You're not asking whether or not he's making a choice, is how he makes the choice, whether it's determined or he makes it. There's this third component. So where would the I be in that? And I guess my question would be, you're going to get this, and it's pretty low level as far as a critique, but you're going to get that as a determinist. I'm sure you have. Well, if it's determined, then it doesn't make any difference what I choose.
So yeah, I think there's maybe a common misconception, or at least the sense you might get by me saying that it's determined, is that it's knowable. Like, don't conflate predictability with determinism. And that's the foundation of chaos theory, right? And I said just chaos, just threw it out there. So chaos theory is the idea that what happens in the future in a complex system, and let's just acknowledge the human body, the human brain, is a highly, highly complex system. To be aware and make predictions of how a complex system is going to behave or act in the future, especially increasingly further in the future, is really difficult. So let's just take Bob, for example, right? So we're trying to predict, we've measured all of the scenarios and inputs up to right before Bob sees Mary, and we're trying to predict what he says next. But let's just say, maybe how about what's the thing he says 1 year from today, right? Okay. That's I believe that's determined, but I in no way can predict that. Right. There's not, there's no computation or knowledge I have. So, just because I think that what Bob's going to do is determined doesn't mean I know what it's going to be. Right. So I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that's important. And I wanted to get you to have you say that, because I think that's one of the kind of straw men that people put up if they're not determinist, is the idea that, well, if it's determined, then everything that's going to happen, it's all predestined, and it doesn't make any difference what I do. But there's, like you said, there's a big difference between maybe what we would call predestined or predetermined and pre-known. Like you said, I like your analogy. So 1 year from now, whether it's Bob or Mary or one of us, you can make the case that it's already going to be determined because of biology and environment what the choice will be in a year, given a certain set of circumstances, but that you don't know what it is. And so so in some ways, I guess, Charlie, I'd like to get your feedback on that. So the difference is, because a free will person is going to say that too, right? I'm going to say, well, the free will person, well, I don't know what somebody's free will is going to choose a year from now. But yet it's going to have those contingencies, those things that influence the decision are going to be, we both agree that those are going to come in. I mean, we might know Bob might be an introvert, so he doesn't like talking to people. Well, that doesn't make any difference if you believe in determinism or free will. He's probably still going to say the same thing. He's probably not going over there. So, but I think what it comes down to is, and I like the way this is going, because it comes down to, because what free will people will say is like, well, you don't have any, there's nothing transcendent then, because it's all biology, it's all science, it's all physical stuff. So it's blah, 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 boring stuff is kind of what you get. And I wish, could you talk to that, and maybe even on a personal level? Because, I've heard people say, well, if it's determined, if you're hard determinism, then you can't really have things that are truly like love and beauty and all that, because that is just biology. There's nothing transcendent. And so I'm not sure I agree with that, but I'll throw that out and I'll let you kind of maybe comment on that.
Yeah, I have great questions. I have two comments. So first, we talk about predictability, and this is where I want to challenge just like our thought process, and why I think what determinism is useful. I probably can make predictions about a behavior you might be doing at 12:47 1 year from now. Like if I said on April 26, 2025, Brian is eating food, there's like a maybe double-digit percentage chance that might be what you're doing, right? Like I can predict some behavior because we're repetitive about it. So there is some predictability. I know that you're going to be hungry. You need sustenance to eat. There's certain times of the day we tend to eat. So, there is predictability in this free will, because we know that there are persistent causes of behavior, right? So I would say that just because, maybe I can't predict specifically what you're eating or where specifically you'll be, I can make reasonable predictions knowing how your biology and behavior tend to work. And not just you, but, you as a human. And, the more I know about you, the more accurate I might be able to make that prediction. Again, it's not certain. I don't know it, but it is effective if I understand the systems of how you make behaviors, right? Studying how humans make decisions. So then your previous question was about transcendent experience. And this is, I think, another one where people feel like hard determinism is very dismissive. Mm-hmm. Like experiences are real, right? Like I don't think that people who say they've had a personal experience with God, I don't think they're lying. I don't think they're making that up. I think that's a very real and personal experience that they have. I think that even free will, or specifically willpower, right? The ability to not want to do something or resist an impulse that you naturally have, right? That's a real experience. When we talk about free will, and I say that free will doesn't exist, people, I think, internalize that as like, oh, you don't believe the experiences that I've had have actually happened to me. And that's not true either. All I'm saying is that my belief is that those experiences are based in biology. That experience really happened, but it happened inside your brain as a result of electronic signals and neurochemicals. And they're very real. And in fact, that's why they're persistent across cultures and in humanity, right? That is part of what makes humans humans. It's just physical. It's just real. And it's caused by, again, I'll go back to the intro. It's caused by something that happened the moment before it, and it influences the thing that happens the moment after.
Yeah. And I think and I wanted to get that out, because I do think in debates like this, at least in my kind of sphere of walk, that people you just make this like, well, you're determined, so you just think everything happens, and you're not. there isn't anything such like love and all that. And I've always hesitated and said, well, have you asked a person who believes that? It's always good to ask the person their beliefs instead of giving the beliefs to the person. So I think you articulated that well. And what it comes down to is this thing called will. And so if you take the word free off of it, which we can do because it's our debate, what is the will? I would think philosophically, that's usually called, I mean, there's different ways to define it, but a faculty of the mind. And so it'd be a power of a mind of reasoning and understanding and then when determine
hey Brian,
this would go ahead.
I think I know where this is going, and so I want to flip a question back on you first.
No, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. So like I said, I think experiences are real. So let's go back to Bob in the coffee shop. From your perspective, describe to me, maybe in order, how Bob would experience his free will in deciding what, in your words, how does he decide what he does? Describe that process, that experience he has in making a decision.
Okay. And I don't think it'll be a whole lot different than yours in the sense that there'll be his thought patterns will be, his synapses will fire and he'll have these memories of her. He'll have, he'll calculate, maybe not, like he's got an abacus or something, but he's in his mind thinking, well, what are the chances she's going to say yes? What are the chances she's going to say no? And eventually all this stuff comes in, all the things you talked about. But then I think the process is that his mind's going to make a decision that he wants to make. That's not determined by those, but influenced by those. And again, why I think this is good, because that's again where the rubber hits the road. It's the idea of he makes it because of his biology and environment, or he makes it himself influenced by his biology and his environment. And that's where he makes the decision, and that's where I think there's this thing called will. And then we get in kind of the ontological idea of what a person is, which we may or may not get to in this debate, but the idea of the mind and the will is an immaterial thing. So we're outside of physical things here. We're into an immaterial view of a human also, and so he's making this because a free will person, I would think, well, at least for me, I'll just go my own self. I can't conceptualize having free will without having some sort of immaterial part of a human that's not directly equal to the physical brain or the physical body. And so there's that, and that gives me the ability to say, okay, well, now it's his mind that uses the brain, that uses the all of this information, but there's a self that's not equal to his brain or his body that makes that choice.
Yeah, I'd love to dive into choices, how brains make choices, but I want to take a step back and look at this experience. So Bob walks in, and you said like he weighs options in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Brian. Do you think that free will chooses the options that come to his mind, or do they if I asked you, for example, what's your favorite movie? Do you feel that you have any free will about what movie pops into your head? And if you don't, do you think that Bob has any free will about the options that pop into his head?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't put free will at the level of the options, but the level of the choice to tell you which one.
Okay, so if he extends his time, will more options come to his mind? Like if maybe there's an impulsive one that we think right away. Yeah. But then we know if we wait, more options come, right? The longer we ponder ideas, the longer we think about problems, the more options.
Right. More options come. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I think, and that's why I think they call it free will. And I'm not a big fan of that term in the first place, but I would call it personal will. It comes from a person, not from anything else, determined by the person, which is I do think, like back to the movie, it's a good analogy. It's like, a few different ones came to mind, and then now I'm going to tell you which one it is. And I think I'd say The Princess Bride. That's probably my favorite movie. So many good quotes from it. And I think, but maybe I'll use one later if somebody says, I do not think that word means what you think it means. But I think, again, I think I chose that based on the options. I don't think I had to choose that. I could have easily chose, something different than that. I could have choose another, movie that, that came to mind was Three Amigos, which you could tell kind of who I am, I guess, by all these deep theological and philosophical movies I know. But yeah, and that's where I don't see. Well, and again, I'm going to ask you this because it's neither one of us can probably do this, but the idea when we're looking at how do you prove one of these or the other, that's the hard part. How do I prove? Because they kind of look the same, don't they, from the outside observer? And I don't know. I don't want to go on because if I ask if you have more questions or we want to go a little bit farther with that, I'm gonna let you go a little bit here.
Well, I think part of what I'm trying to get at, and again, my goal is to, as people, I think, understand the viewpoint I'm coming from, find useful perspectives for coming out of it. So again, I want to step back and say the experience of will, the concept of will, of free will, of weighing choices, that's real. That really happens in our brains. Mm-hmm. And I part of what I'm trying to tease out here is if you really think about it, there is a specific process that we go through. Oh, and part of free will is optionality, right? And the options that come up just appear in our brain. We have no control over them. But there's a level set here around decision making. So in our brain, we have the prefrontal cortex. Mm-hmm. It is decidedly human. I mean, other animals have prefrontal cortex. None of them are as developed or as used as effectively and as humans are. And there is a specific process that humans go through where we have autonomic, impulsive, Freud called it the id, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Or the ego, maybe, I forget which one's which, but this part of our brain, this deeply animalistic historical part that has, it's his attraction to Mary, right? He doesn't decide to be attracted to her. That is right. Something that comes from deeply, yes. Yeah. And he might even have, I'd love to give her a hug right now, right? He might have an impulsive thing that comes from the back part of his brain. And we know that in decision-making, particularly ones where you have to resist impulses, it goes through the prefrontal cortex first. That's where the cognitive weighing out decisions is. It's the same place where we do mathematical computations, right? It looks for and weighs out logic based on things that have been learned before. And that's where we're calling memories to the front of our brain. That's where options are coming from, is our prefrontal cortex is scanning the rest of our brain, our memories, our thoughts, our logic, and it's looking for all the things that we've learned in our life, all the phrases that we've seen in movies when we ask girls out, all the ways we've heard our friends do it, or some creative combination of things we've heard in the past. We know humans are creative. It seems, I have a 4-year-old daughter, and she comes up with things that are totally organic, but they tend to be related ideas from things she's seen in other places. That's where most of human creativity comes from. It's associative. Mm-hmm. And so I think where you're asking, this decision making, it happens in this front part of the brain. And I think there's easy tests we can do to prove it. When you have significant damage to your prefrontal cortex, your ability to resist impulsive action disappears. And that, I think, is a measurement of willpower. And it can be trained. We can improve our ability to make willpower by understanding that process, right? There's a famous study about the way judges make decisions on people who are coming in and asking for parole or getting punished, right? They can measure the length of time since that judge ate last, because willpower, the resistance of natural impulsive behavior, is energy consuming. And if you're running low on energy, you don't have enough glucose in your brain, you're not as good at resisting those impulses. So when we talk about decision making, we know where it happens in the brain. We know that when that area is damaged, it can't be done effectively, and that we know that it's consumed by fuel sources. It's a metabolic physical process to weigh the different outcomes. The longer you wait, which again requires effort, it requires will, it requires, it doesn't come naturally to think longer and harder, right? If studying math problems was easy, right, everyone would do that, but it's extremely difficult because of the amount of effort we put in. And again, that effort is finite. It gets burned out. And it's a biological, physical process that happens in our brain.
Yeah. And I think that's it, again, all of that I agree with the idea that we look at the science of it, and we look at the biology of it and the physical biology of it. And we can always see that, they're able to look, even and see which ones are firing and all those types of things. But I think that the key, difference. Well, let me ask you this question before we might not even get into the other stuff, is could you be a physicalist and believe in free will?
I don't think so.
I don't either.
I
think that'd be hard. I don't think you can make a really good case for it.
I haven't heard a good argument for it.
I have not either. And I almost think it's, I was going to say determined, but I don't want to make a pun. The idea, I think it seems like it just follows that if we believe that we're meat all the way down, as they say, completely physical and have no kind of immaterial self at all, that it does seem like some sort of determinism follows. And I do like the fact that you went with the hard, because I think the soft just misses. It's like, you're just be hard. You could do that. It's okay. We'll still like you. We'll still let you come to our debates and, play golf and all those types of things. But so I do think that's where it comes down to, is kind of where, why does this matter? We've hit, but who we are. And that's been the debate, I guess. Are we, a unified physical humans, or is there some sort of substance dualism going on, where there is which a lot of obviously theological religious views are that way. And then, of course, which is quite hard to prove, it's quite hard to prove immaterial things that you can't see, so you have to do it by inference and logical arguments if you can, which we don't really need to get into today. But one of the things that, I want to ask you this, because when I think about this, it makes me think, well, hey, here's some options here, but I want to get your take on this. So when Bob is getting ready to ask her, so maybe one of the things he does, we do this, he's running some asset liability modeling to find out how this is going to work in the future. Okay. So, it's like, okay, what if I ask her and she says, "You're an idiot. Why would anybody want to go out with you? That would hurt our friendship and make me feel terrible." So in his, and I'll use mind. In his mind, he sees this picture, and he's going off and he's dreaming, and he sees her say that, and he sees her get mad at him, and he sees them the next day at the office, and she won't even talk to him. And he sees this whole thing. You can tell what dress she's wearing, what perfume she's got. Where's that at? And again, this is not supposed to be a defeater. I just want to get your feedback. He's got a thought. It's an image. If you ask him, it's a first person image. You can call it a dream or a vision or whatever, but it's a thought. Where would you find that thought? And could that be accessed by somebody other than him without him explaining it?
Yeah. So brains are, it would, I'm not a neurosurgeon, right? I'm an expert. I do love studying the brain. I would guess that it's probably an interaction between his visual cortex, his hippocampus, and his prefrontal cortex. And then you could measure the activity of it, like where it is. And this is interesting. We talk about like plugging in wearable devices right now, like
right.
Neuralink, and it's so I want to cautious, because I think people can get confused here.
Yeah, and that's not what we're
right now.
A thought.
Right now you can't look at the neural activity and know what they're thinking. You might know, like, they're processing a visual, or they're feeling an emotion, or they're reacting in fear because their amygdala lights up. But you don't necessarily know, like, especially in the prefrontal cortex, like you can't discern what that thought is. And in fact, plug-in and wearables, it's not so much that they can read your mind. When they're first put in your brain, they don't actually do anything. your brain learns that if an electrical signal hits it, it does the thing you want.
Okay.
Like that's how learning happens, right? Like, oh, I got to the end of a math problem and it was right. The way I did it was the right thing. Hey, and your brain knows that, like, hey, good neurochemical reward, cement that learning back in. That process that you just went through to solve the problem, that's the right process. Keep that neural pathway. And so when you have wearables and stuff, what happens is, just an electrical signal hits it, and then, the mouse moves in the way you want to, and your brain goes, oh, that electrical signal moved the mouse the way you wanted to, and it creates a new neural pathway. So like when you plug things into your brain, you actually learn how they work. And that's really powerful. The plasticity of your brain is like understanding how it learns new things. And it's by like the result being positive. And I think there's actually a measurable distance. I think it's like under 3 seconds. You have to have that positive reward. And then it reinforces that behavior that was a good behavior.
Okay. And so, and I think I like that because I like, and those are, reading what they can do, and even to the point of making, neurons fire to maybe have sight again. It's just that I just keep hoping that they can do that. I know they're doing a little bit of that, but I think it does come back, and we don't have to go on this too far, but it is that it seems like, from my perspective, there's an immaterial image that's first person only. Like right now, I can see Bob. I see his Starbucks little insignia on his cup. I see Mary. She's got a red dress. I can see it all. And I know in my brain, the physiology, that things are firing to help that happen. But that is not the image, and that's in my estimation, that's just something that triggers an image.
So let me ask you this, Brian. Imagine that it was the same area in the brain that fires every time you visualize something. If I were to damage that area of someone's brain, would they still be able to have that experience?
I don't think they probably would, but because I don't think, and I do think that's a very good, this is fun. I don't know if you're having fun. I'm having so much fun because just if you're watching, or Dave, I don't know if you want to even chime in, but this is what I just want to thank you for your honesty and your integrity, and the fact that we're here to just get to know. I'm learning more than I thought I would. This is really fun for me. I do think that you have to come up with a model of substance dualism that takes that into account, or it's not real. I did chaplain work in a neurological ICU in Austin, Texas. And you see these strokes and blunt brain trauma and Alzheimer's and dementia, and these people, there's things not firing, and that's what we would say, and it's debilitating, it's sad. And so you think about it metaphysically, you're kind of like, well, is there anything going on there then? Are they gone? Are they really there? Is that, I remember this 27-year-old lady that was had been in a car accident, and her 3-year-old son comes in, and where's mom? Is mom still there? And then I'm supposed to give all this metaphysical advice. It gets very emotional. It's like, but I think, again, that's where I think the difference comes, is like, this is an analogy that JP Moreland gave, and I like it, and you can do what you want with it. I have one about piano and piano player, but this one's car and driver. So the way he puts it is that that the car is your physical brain, or we'll just go with brain here, not just but everything, your physical self, and the driver is the soul, or the mind, if we were talking about the brain. So if the car gets I can drive the car around, and I hit the feet and shift and everything, and that drives the car. And if you were an alien that came and all you saw was the car, you think that would be one big, and it's a little bit, analogy breaks down, because obviously the driver's physical too, but immaterial. But when the car gets so damaged, or you don't put gas in it or something, no matter the soul there would still be fine. It just can't get the brain to work to do the physical thing. And so I don't think that proves substance dualism, but it shows how that does still fit the data that, when somebody has Alzheimer's or has an accident, they won't be able to to be able to do that. But it makes me say, and again, I just told the little guy that, I think she's still there. And I know, and so, well, I'll be quiet, let you kind of respond to that. Does that seem like a lucid way of looking at it to you, or?
Mm-hmm.
Let me know.
I like the articulation. So just if I can rehash it, your brain is a tool that can be used by something non-physical.
Right. Yeah. I think that was much quicker than what I said, but well put.
It's okay. It's okay. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying. So again, my question then is, you believe then that there are neurons that fire in the brain, and their firing is not caused by an electrical signal or a chemical released from a neuron next to it?
I think it is. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Right now, I mean,
let me clarify what I'm pointing is the continuous chain of causality.
Well, right? That's continuous chain. Okay.
Right. So every neuron firing is influenced by a neuron firing immediately before it ad infinitum to conception. Right. Like there's a continuous, what I'm saying is you're saying that there's a non-physical force changing that physical behavior. So you think neurons sometimes fire just for a non-physical cause other than an immediate physical cause.
Right. I would say that. And I think you'd have to break it down to which ones. I mean, I was going to say that, each one of our hearts had probably beaten about 60 times every minute. I didn't cognitively cause that. But yet somewhere in my brain physiology that happened. And that's the part I'll have to say for myself. It's like, I still try to work through. Now, how does that work? If there's a non-physical part of myself, when there's a lot of my physical that does, back to kind of Freud's subconsciously is doing it in the brain. And I don't know, I don't think I have the ability, does it seem like I can't change my heart rate just by thinking about it. And I could do it by doing physical exercise or something, but I can't say, well, I think I have made the free will choice for my heart to go down to 30 beats a minute for a couple minutes. I mean, I don't have that ability.
But if you understand the biomechanical system of how to slow your heart rate, you probably could.
You could, if you had the right instrumentation. Yeah. But just as a I do think what I am saying, and hopefully this answers your question, I do believe that there is a non-physical part of me that is the causal agent in the chain for the decision-making, frontal cortex types of things, and maybe a few others, but that's the main thing I would focus on, that there's something that's really, and you almost have to believe that if you're a free will person. I mean, otherwise you would go back to the other idea, not that it imposes itself, but it does. I mean, that's kind of the definition of it.
Okay. You ready for my next question, Brian?
Oh, I'm ready.
You said this in your intro, that part of your view of free will is that you hope we understand why people make decisions.
Yes.
So why does free will make the decision it makes, this non-physical? Why does it make those? How does it make those decisions, and why? Yeah,
the why questions are always hard, aren't they? I think how is easy. You have an immaterial self that has the power to do it, and it's simplistic. I realize to say it that way, but the why, that's a much harder question, and I think it goes on both sides. Why one might make a decision, it kind of comes back in a deterministic system. You might not know why. You can say it happened, but it's more about what does that cause. But it does come back to the justification factors of responsibility. When why does somebody, and we can get into that hopefully in another debate, but why do I choose it? I mean, I choose it because it's what I most want. I think that's what will is. I mean, to some extent.
Why do you want it?
Because it's who I am.
What about you?
Well, that's the mystery of it, isn't it? It's not something I can quantify. Like back to Bob.
Is it possibly something you could have developed? The who you are has been something that's been developed. From the time you were an infant, right?
It is. I think our environment and our physiology, and I may choose. and again, I do think the big difference is determined versus influenced. Because
So let me just challenge you here, because wouldn't you say that the driver influences the car?
Yes, I would say so in that analogy. Yeah.
Right. So I think that the influence, non-physical or physical, has to have a deriving purpose.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. If you look at it from for instance, I think what you're probably going to into is ethics and morality and purpose.
And your argument, sorry, I hate to jump the gun here, Brian, but then there has to be objective, non-physical. There has to be objective, non-physical morality.
Yes, I would think you'd have to be there. Yeah, I mean, I guess you wouldn't. I'm trying to think, because the subject's choosing. I suppose you could make a case that you could have your own objective reality, morality, which would be kind of subjective. So I would say no. I think you would have to make a case that there is objective reality that comes outside of the self.
Would you say it's universal, that all humanity would be part of the same universal objective morality then?
I think it would be available to them. Yeah.
Can you explain that available to them a bit more?
Well, again, the objective, again, it's kind of back to, as a human being, you would be created in a way to honor the creator. That would be objective.
Okay, well, there's something influencing your behavior.
Yeah, I think it would influence in the sense that there would be if we are non-physical, if we have a non-physical piece, you would have to think about more. Would that come? It would be hard to make that case from a purely evolutionary standpoint.
No, don't tell me where my morality comes from. Ask where your morality comes from.
No, I'm just saying I would have.
I think you could absolutely make the case from an evolutionary perspective.
I would have a hard time making the case not of the morality of the substance, the immaterial substance part.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's
yes.
what I mean. I'm sorry. Yeah, the morality.
Yeah,
I think you can get morality from the other way. I don't know if you can get objective morality, but you can get morality from physical only, because I think from physical only, it seems it would be hard. You could get that I would want to do something, but I don't know if you could get universally that you ought to do something. That's okay. It is from an ought type of stuff. Good question. I think that's good.
Yeah.
And an analogy of a car does break down. I realize that. I mean, it's an analogy.
It's useful though. To describe what you're talking about, a non-physical influencing physical reality in a way that propagates in behaviors using your body as a tool, as a vehicle for a soul. So, we're at like 12 minutes here. I hope we have some good closing and wrap up. We did not get to what I thought would be the most fun, which is about like its usefulness in thinking about society and interactions. So I would love to do that again.
A whole list of stuff, and that I think
Brian,
and even this who we are. I really want to talk, because if you're arguing, and I assume you think the same thing. If I was going to say argument, my case doesn't withstand any type of scrutiny, it's not a very good case. And so I want you to keep coming and at it, because people just, in my sphere of influence, it seems like people unfortunately think an assertion is an argument.
Yeah, and I really, the reason I'm asking you is not so much that I'm trying to catch you, but
I know you're not, but you're helping.
I think that a lot of people come from a viewpoint that you do, and I want to have a concrete description of that viewpoint that you're coming from. I think that needs to it really needs to be established to talk about it. So what I'd like my final comment here is I'd like to describe again, I think those experiences are real, that you feel that this influence of something that it does feel like there are objectively right and wrong things. Like, you don't want to offend Mary. Bob does not want to offend Mary. No, he doesn't want to be hurt. He doesn't want to make his workplace awkward. He feels a deeper sense of like wanting to do the right thing. And I think that experience is totally real, and we all feel it in the decisions that we make when our brains are trying to figure out how we decide. So I think there's just one concept maybe that I want to describe, my perspective of, and it's the soul. Again, I think even people who are non-religious have a connection to this idea of soul, of this non-physical aspect to ourselves. So I'm just going to describe, in my opinion, what the physical nature of the soul is. Because again, my goal is not to convince you that I'm right. It's that hopefully in a future conversation, I can take these kind of ideas that we've articulated and explain why they are useful in translating to the feelings we have about others, deciding how we structure the world, and thinking about our own behavior. So the soul to me is the natural and learned feelings we have around our behaviors and the memory we have of them. We know that the things that we have done in the past, maybe where we acted impulsively and it wasn't necessarily the best thing, when we're 16 or 15 years old, we maybe did something we shouldn't have done and we feel bad about it. And we carry around sometimes the negative or positive things we do, and it defines how we self-identify, right? Yeah. And we need to take care of that. When we think about the decision that when Bob's approaching Mary, he knows that whatever that decision is going to live within how he feels about himself. It will become part of his soul, and he will carry that soul on for the rest of his life. And so when we weigh and we think about decisions, it's because we know that the decisions we've made in the past live with us in the future. And the decisions that we're making right now will live with us in the future too. And it's those memories that define our image of ourself that make it important. So again, this experience you're describing, and I think it's again a reason why people sometimes have a hard time saying, oh, it's physical, like it's determined, right? Like there's not, like the soul doesn't sit in part of my brain, but it is part of this entire concept that we have of ourself. And I think that that's very real and very important. And if you want to call that self-image and self-feeling you have about yourself as your soul, and taking care of it by taking care of yourself and forgiving yourself and loving yourself and trying to do right in the future, that's a good thing. That's like an objectively a good thing. And now if you're saying like, oh, it's non-deterministic and I'm saying it's deterministic, like fine, that's semantics to me. But I think maybe this is a good point to end on, at least this part of the discussion, that the point is that Bob should try to do the thing that feels right and will do right by everyone else and will allow him to carry forward in a way that he feels good about.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to kind of, just to throw in the math club, the human flourishing. I mean, that's kind of what you're talking about there. So yeah, and I like the way you put soul. I think that's a neat way to look at it. I think we could talk more about, kind of the metaphysics of that and how that works, and probably have a lot of similarities. But Dave, is there any questions that anybody had?
We do have one question actually, and this gets off from the whole idea of something I've been thinking about lately as I've been digging into artificial intelligence. And so the question from actually an Anna, a different Anna, and she says, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on whether artificial intelligence possesses free will. So I suppose maybe that's probably
Brian. Well, I think it would come down. I've thought about that, ironically, because we've talked about it some. I don't know if I like the term. I'm trying to redo the term, and Charlie will be real helpful, I think, and Dave too, about if this makes sense. I started to think, could we call it human created intelligence? Because I mean, is there anything wrong with, because it certainly is created by these large language models, and all these are created by us. So it does come down to the word control, doesn't it? I mean, the idea and power to make decisions, but control. Who's controlling these? Isn't that the thing we're always scared of? Is I saw Will Smith and iRobot. If they start having control that we don't have. So if you want to give the analogy I would give, and I want Charlie to talk about this, so I'll do this quickly. If you believe that a transcendent God created humanity, he has to give up control at some level for that human to make a free choice, right? So now put you in the God role. So now we got humans making large language models and robots. don't you have to give up some control to allow them to have free will? Because as long as you're controlling it, it'll never be free.
Yeah, so I'll approach it from a hard determinist perspective. I think maybe I want to distinguish between two ideas. I would argue that we have artificial intelligence, and that, you know, maybe it can't solve actuarial problems, but it can certainly, you can have a conversation with it where it is successfully able to, you know, convince you that it's human, and just based on a chat you'd be unable to do the difference. There's a famous experiment where they had a large language module, you know, it had access to the internet, so it hired someone to get you through the CAPTCHA testing, right?
Okay.
Like it knew it couldn't get through this, like identify the bus stuff, so it tried to hire a human to do it for it. And the human said, you know, asked it like, you know, like, are you artificial intelligence or something like that? And you know, they have a log of the artificial intelligence, like it having a conversation with itself, and it went like, oh, I'm not supposed to disclose that I'm artificial intelligence. So it came up with a lie and said, oh, I'm blind and I can't do it myself. And it tricked this person into believing that, you know, it was a human. So I would argue that artificial intelligence is there. I think the distinguishment, maybe to your point of like, what is the difference still between humanity and the artificial intelligence we have now? And I want to go back to something I said at the very beginning, you know, behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. We have feelings. We have a biological, you know, drive that, you know, that I think, going back to morality, I think there is an evolutionary, deeper sense of morality, of purpose, of, you know, we fear death, and we love our families. And so intelligence really enables us to achieve the things that feelings drive us to do. And right now there aren't feelings that these computers we've created have. They don't want to do stuff. We can give them goals, but those are human goals. Yeah. And they just have an intellectual capacity to figure out how to achieve them, to solve things. So, you know, maybe we have artificial intelligence, but it's not human yet, because it doesn't have that human component of what makes us human.
It's artificial. I mean, that's why we call it that, you know, it's not real. And I think that's the key. It's the idea of, you know, the other thing I think we did a podcast on this once, but it was, well, consciousness that comes in, certainly, but what we call sapience, which is not just awareness, but self-awareness. You know, they can act like you said, Charlie, they can act like they're self-aware, but it's not really self-awareness. It's artificial. It's completely determined. But yeah, that's a really good question, because that's going to come. And if we get to the point, it doesn't really even matter if they're truly even sentient, if they're able to make decisions that rule over, in some ways, humanity. You know, I mean, that's the iRobot idea, you know, but the idea of you know, people are even talking about, back to Bob and Mary, you know, Bob says, well, I don't want to do this dating thing, and there's too much risk. I'm just going to fall in love with a robot, you know, an artificial intelligent, you know, is that the next step? You know, that's out there, I'm hearing, and you can do that. I think, don't we all know there's something wrong with that? You know, it's just not, like you said, those aren't real feelings.
Mm-hmm. I will add, in my 2 cents worth, that they are talking a lot about how artificial intelligence is a good tool to use for psychotherapy. That basically psychotherapists are, you know, overworked. There's not enough around of them to solve all the problems, and there's enough logic that has been built into artificial intelligence that they can ask questions. And one of the things they said that is a benefit of artificial intelligence is that it's done without judgment, and that people like talking to a computer better because they don't feel like that computer is judging them.
Yeah,
whereas,
they're not racist, they're not bigoted, they're not, sexist, all those
so
things.
it is kind of interesting twist. Anyway, I thought that was it gives potential for some benefit, that maybe people can talk to a computer and feel like that's listening to them and ask them good questions, and, you know, that gets things out of their head, and and wherever that frontal cortex is at, or whatever is going on in the brain, is processing and getting that out there. So maybe that's a good thing.
But I think artificial intelligence it's not the same thing. I'm not making that point, but it does give you a deterministic kind of view.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of like the car and the driver soul view. It's an analogous to a hard deterministic view. There's differences, obviously, as you already said, but it does give you a little bit of an analogy there, which is kind of cool. But,
okay. We'll say, hey, we are in an hour, but why don't we just take maybe 30 seconds, a minute, and Brian, maybe if you have any last thoughts to share, and then I'll hand it over and have Charlie do the same. It doesn't have to be anything big, profound, but what's your last thought you'd like to leave with our audience?
Well, I guess I just really enjoyed this. I think I could go on for hours after this. I think my thought is that there's a lot more similarities than most people would think between the two views that we have, and we've seen some of that already. And I think that's something to just be cognizant about. Treat each other with respect, and listen and try to understand, and focus on the similarities and then the differences you deal with.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Charlie. Yeah, I like that. So I'll say, I hope one of the things everyone took away is that Brian and I had a lot of maybe disagreement on why things were being done, but at no point did we say that what Bob should do, that one of us knew better than the other. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's an important takeaway, is that like harm determinism and free will is not about, and maybe we'll discuss it later, it's not necessarily about what is the right thing, but why. And I hope today that we dove a little in the brain and brain chemistry, that at least that you could take away is studying how we work and why we work is a worthwhile thing to do, and gaining a deeper understanding of the physical nature of ourselves could be enlightening.
Okay, well, very good. So I'll just end real quick and appreciate everyone that's watching this. And if I will ask if you found this helpful, just to share it with a friend and let them ponder on it, because if you found it helpful, perhaps someone else that will find it helpful as well. So with that, we will end it, and thank you for your time and attention.